There is a skeleton standing in a museum right now. It belonged to a man who lived about 12,000 years ago. He was exceptionally tall, even by prehistoric standards. Broad shoulders, strong bones, healthy teeth. By every measure, physically impressive. Now here's the part that nobody prepared me for. His great-great-great-grandchildren, the ones who came just a few generations after him, were significantly shorter, same family line, same region, same species, 6 inches shorter, in just a few generations. And the reason why is one of the most uncomfortable truths in all of human history, because it means the thing we thought saved us. The single greatest invention in human history actually made us smaller, sicker, and weaker almost overnight. How tall were we really okay? So before we get into the crazy part, you need to understand what ancient humans actually looked like, because the image most people have is wrong. We picture cave people as short, hunched, primitive-looking creatures. That is not what the bones show. Hunter-gatherers from the Paleolithic period were tall, genuinely tall. The average male hunter-gatherer in prehistoric Europe stood around 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 inches. The average female stood around 5 feet 5 to 5 feet 6. For context, the average height of a man in medieval England thousands of years later was 5 feet 7. So prehistoric cave dwellers were taller than medieval knights. Let that sink in for a second. And it was not just height, their bones were dense, their muscle attachment points were enormous, their teeth were nearly perfect. These were not primitive weaklings. These were some of the healthiest humans who ever lived. The moment everything changed. And then, roughly 10,000 years ago, something happened that changed everything. Farming. It started in a region called the Fertile Crescent, modern-day Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Egypt, and spread outward across the world over the following thousands of years. And everywhere it spread, the same thing happened. People got shorter, not slightly shorter, not barely noticeably shorter. Early Neolithic farmers were on average about 1.1 to 1.5 inches shorter than their hunter-gatherer predecessors. In Western Europe, early farmers were up to 14 centimeters shorter than the hunter-gatherers who came before them. 14 centimeters. In one generation. That is not a gradual evolutionary change. That is a sudden physical collapse happening to real living people in real time. Scientists found the evidence written directly into the bones. Growth plates stunted. Stress markers all through the skeleton. Signs of repeated illness and malnutrition visible in the physical record of the bones themselves. The bones do not lie. And the bones are saying something went very wrong. Why farming made things worse. Now here is the part that should genuinely break your brain. Farming was supposed to be an upgrade. Before farming, you had to go find your food every single day. Hunt it, forage for it, chase it, dig it up. Farming meant you could grow food in one place. Store it. Have it ready whenever you needed it. That sounds like progress. That sounds like the problem being solved. So why did people immediately get shorter and sicker? Because what farming gave with one hand, it took away with the other. And it took away a lot more than it gave. The diet disaster. Hunter-gatherers ate an extraordinary variety of food. Meat, fish, nuts, berries, roots, insects, eggs, wild plants. And here's what that variety was actually doing inside their bodies. Every time they ate meat and fish, their body produced something called IGF-1. This is the hormone that literally tells your bones to grow longer. More protein from meat and fish equals more IGF-1 equals taller bones. Simple as that. When farming arrived, that protein variety collapsed overnight. Early farmers ate wheat, maybe some barley, maybe some lentils if they were lucky. And wheat is low in the specific proteins that trigger IGF-1 production. So the hormone that told their bones to grow longer stopped being produced at the same levels. And the bones listened. But that was only the first problem, because wheat contains something called phytates. Phytates are compounds in grain that physically block your body from absorbing certain minerals, specifically zinc. And zinc is essential for growth hormone function. So early farmers were not just eating less zinc than hunter-gatherers. The wheat they were eating was actively preventing them from absorbing whatever tiny amount of zinc they did have. Their bodies were being blocked from the inside. And then there was the third thing. Human height is mostly determined during specific growth windows in childhood. Short windows, a few years each. If a child gets sick during those windows, the growth plates in their bones physically pause. They stop growing, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, And when the illness passes, the body tries to catch up. But it almost never fully does. Each illness during a growth window leaves a permanent scar on the bone called a Harris line. Scientists can look at an ancient skeleton and count exactly how many times that person got seriously sick as a child just by counting the Harris lines. Early farmer children's skeletons are absolutely full of them because they were sick constantly. Disease from density, disease from animals, disease from contaminated water, all hitting during the exact years when their bones were supposed to be growing. So here's the actual answer to why ancient humans got shorter. Less IGF-1 from less protein. Zinc absorption blocked by the wheat they were eating. And growth windows repeatedly interrupted by childhood illness. 3 separate biological mechanisms all hitting the same child at the same time. And every single one of them was a direct consequence of farming, the disease, explosion. And here is where it gets even worse. Because the diet was only half the problem. When humans started farming, they stopped moving. They built villages, then towns, then cities, and they packed people together in dense communities in ways that had never existed before in human history. Before farming, a hunter-gatherer group might be 20 to 50 people spread across a wide territory, constantly moving. After farming, you had hundreds of people living in close proximity, sharing water sources, sharing animals, sharing everything. And diseases absolutely loved this. Tuberculosis, typhoid, cholera, smallpox, measles. Almost all of the great epidemic diseases that have killed hundreds of millions of people throughout history, they emerged after farming, not before, because epidemic diseases need density to spread. They need enough people close enough together that the chain of infection never breaks. Hunter-gatherers lived in groups too small and too spread out for most epidemic diseases to survive in. Early farmers handed those diseases exactly the conditions they needed to explode. And the height records in the bones show the exact moment it happened. Every time a new farming community established itself in a new region, every time density increased, the bones of that generation got shorter. The body shrinking is the body under attack and losing. The animal problem. And then there was the animal situation. Because farming did not just mean growing plants, it meant domesticating animals. Keeping them close, breeding them, living alongside them constantly. And animals came with their own parasites, their own diseases, their own biological gifts that nobody had asked for. Cattle gave humans tuberculosis and smallpox variants. Pigs gave humans influenza. Chickens gave humans typhoid-related illnesses. Horses gave humans the common cold. Every single domestic animal that early farmers lived alongside was quietly donating something to the human disease burden. And because early farmers lived right next to their animals, sleeping near them, working around them, eating food that was contaminated by them, the transfer happened constantly. Hunter-gatherers encountered wild animals too, but they moved through animal territories without permanently living in them. Farmers built their homes next to the animals, permanently. The animals were not going anywhere, and neither were their diseases. The recovery. Now here is the part of the story that gives you a little hope, because it did not stay this way forever. After the initial collapse, humans slowly adapted. Over thousands of years, populations that farmed developed genetic resistance to some of the new diseases. They developed slightly more efficient ways to process grain nutritionally. Trade routes expanded the variety of available food. And very slowly, across the Copper Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, heights started creeping back up through the Copper Age, Bronze Age, and Iron Age. But here is the thing that should genuinely disturb you. The average male height in Europe did not fully recover to Paleolithic levels until the 20th century. Male heights in historic Europe generally remained within the range of 5 feet, 5 to 5 feet 7, until the 19th century. That means for roughly 10,000 years, from the moment farming started until about 100 years ago, the average human was shorter than their prehistoric hunting and gathering ancestors. 10,000 years of being shorter than cave people, because of bread, the real answer. So why did ancient humans suddenly get shorter? The honest answer is they made a trade. And they did not fully understand what they were trading away. They traded variety for reliability. They traded health for security. They traded physical strength for the ability to feed larger populations. And in the short term, that trade looked like a disaster written into every bone and every stunted growth plate of every early farming community on Earth. But here is the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this. Without that trade, none of what came after would have been possible. Cities need surplus food. Writing needs cities. Science needs writing, medicine needs science. The entire chain of human civilization runs back to that first farmer planting that first seed, and getting shorter because of it. So the next time someone calls ancient people primitive for not having what we have now, remember that the reason we have it is because they gave up their health to build it,